When things go sideways on the job, in a meeting, or in a relationship, we tend to act based on how we feel. The real question is, where did those feelings come from? And are they the appropriate feelings for the situation at hand? That's what we're going to talk about. Let's get into it. Welcome to Leadership on the Run. Another book recommendation for you this week, a classic, Crucial Conversations. Came out more than 20 years ago, still just as applicable today. I want to talk about my favorite part of the book, where we learn how we get to the actions we take. Many times these are actions we come to regret later. So how do we make sure that our first swing at this is better? Here's a diagram that could help. You can see from the 3 blocks below that something happens, it generates an emotion, and then we act based on that emotion. In reality, there's another step between those first 2 blocks. It happens in a split second. And here's what it is. We tell ourselves a story. Something happens. We tell ourselves a story. It makes us feel a certain way. And then we act on that feeling. Here's the problem with your story. It might not be right. When we look back at our diagram, that first block is where we find the facts. And any set of facts can be used to tell an infinite number of stories. And different stories create very different emotions. So the real trick here is that we have to master our stories so they don't hijack our emotions. There are 3 types of stories we tend to tell ourselves. See if you recognize any of these. The first story is the victim story. We tell ourselves it's not our fault. The other person is bad, dumb, or wrong. And of course, we're good, right, and brilliant. When we tell our story, we leave out the parts about our contribution. You've all seen the sitcom episodes where one person is relating their story, their version of the story, and they appear saintly, while the other person is turning red, growing horns, and wielding a pitchfork. And then when the other person tells their version of the story, the tables turn almost completely. The truth is in there somewhere, probably in the middle. When we find ourselves telling a victim story, we need to truthfully acknowledge our role in what happened. The next story is the villain story. We tell ourselves that it's all their fault. We tend to minimize our contribution and overemphasize their guilt in the situation. We might even tag the other person with some choice labels. When we find ourselves in a villain story, we need to ask ourselves this question. Why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do what this person is doing? I found myself needing to use that question a few times, and I find that it really softens the emotions, and empathy begins to replace judgment. The final story we might tell ourselves is the helpless story. This is when we tell ourselves there's nothing else I can possibly do. We are powerless to do anything helpful or healthy. Of course, it's just a story. While the victim and villain stories look backward to what's already happened, the helpless story looks forward to the things we can't possibly do. When we find ourselves in a helpless story, we need to ask ourselves what we really want for ourselves, for others, and for the relationship that's being affected by this situation. With an honest answer to those questions, we need to ask ourselves, what would I do right now if I really wanted those things? While there are an infinite number of stories we could tell ourselves, and most of the time we'll get it wrong, it is possible that your version of the story is correct. Either way, it's important that you talk it through with the person on the other side of this dilemma. That's going to take some intentionality. And one way that you can do that is by offering your story and then asking them if they see it differently. At least at this point, you've opened up the dialogue. You have a shot at getting at the truth and possibly restoring a relationship. I found this one concept from the book extremely helpful, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Check it out for yourself and learn the full toolkit for handling crucial conversations. This book should be in your library. Let me know what you think in the comments below. For those of you who have come along for the run, we're getting close to the end of week 3 in our march to Boston. And ironically, it's two videos in a row. I've run out of miles before running out of video. Had a rough few days and landed week 2 a little short on mileage. And week 3 this week started the same way. So I've made a few tweaks to the plan to bring down some of the harder efforts. So instead of 3 or sometimes 4 hard efforts out of the week, I brought that down to 2 for sure, 2.5 some weeks. And what's a half? Well, 1/2 concept is on my long runs is taking the first 3/4 of the long run at an easy clip and then finishing on tired legs at marathon pace for the last quarter of the mileage. So for example, this Saturday is a 16-mile long run, be 12 miles at an easy pace, and then the last 4 miles at marathon pace. I'll put some of the workouts from the last couple weeks on the screen so you can see what I've been up to as recorded by Strava. Let me know what you're working on and what events you're aiming for this spring. We've got a big run here in Pensacola coming up in February, first weekend in February, called the Double Bridge Run. So that's my next event along the way to Boston, and I will probably slip in a 10K as well, probably a month before Boston. So that's going to do it for today. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, and I'll see you next time. In the meantime, keep moving, and remember, no one gets better by accident. Great leaders are intentional.